All right, welcome back. So if you guys were listening to Kathleen's story, you're going to want to hear Wes's story, which is sometimes the other half of things that are going on. And again, I've met Wes and Kathleen when we were out at an event for business building. You already heard kind of some of the stories, so I'm not going to repeat some of that as far as the introduction of how we got together. But it was really, really, truly a special time where we could actually share on a deeper level than just business, which then led me to ask both Wes and Kathleen to be able to step in here and talk about their stories and talk about the real life events and some of the challenges that you faced and some of the things that are going on. So Wes, welcome. I'm so thankful you're here. I'm really excited to hear about what's going to happen here and how you're going to share all of the really cool things that are going on and sometimes not so cool.
Absolutely. Well, awesome, Tim. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started. And what we always do here when we get started into this is really like, what were those foundational things? What happened right before you kind of entered into your adult stage or entering into the adult life? What were the things that happened that really kind of formed your basis for doing life? And so what are those beliefs that are, like I grew up this way. I mean, there's all kinds of stories that we hear, and I'm really curious to hear where you got started at.
Yeah, so I grew up single mother, super poor. I had a stepfather for a while, alcoholic, used to beat me and my mom. She left him. Then it was just me and her at age 10, and then she just did the best she could. We were living on the East Coast, actually, yeah, in Delaware, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and she got a job bartending. So I had already gone out and started hanging out with the older kids and getting in trouble, got in a lot of trouble. So she's like, "Hey, you have a grandfather out in San Diego." So we made the move out here. And I kind of isolated a lot, but I still, I like skateboarding and yeah, just got caught up in the drug scene, and so that just even though I like kind of stuck to myself just because I got in so much trouble, I was like, okay, I just want to kind of go to school and but I got just caught up in the drugs, like marijuana and stuff, and was growing it and selling it and all this kind of crazy stuff. And my mom, when I graduated high school, she took off to Alaska, and I was just left by myself, and she thought I was going to go to the Coast Guard. So the recruiter came to the high school. He was going to recruit me. I kept dodging him. Long story short, I didn't sign up for the Coast Guard. I took a different trajectory. I started pretty much becoming a drug dealer, importing weed from Mexico and sending it to the East Coast. My whole outlook on life was, you just kind of sorry about that, hold on, that it was just all, it was me, she's like, literally the day I graduated high school, she just took off and she's like, "You can come with me to Alaska." I was like, "I'm in San Diego, Mission Beach, California, like this is like a dream. I have a house right near the beach, got a roommate." So I didn't take her up on that offer, didn't join the Coast Guard. Got in a lot of trouble with that. Ended up going down to Nicaragua on the run because I got into some trouble. So I got myself in tons of trouble. My whole outlook was just like, I didn't have any direction. I didn't have I didn't have a father figure. And I was just doing whatever I wanted to do and what I thought was right or what I thought made me happy, or
Well, let's unpack that a little bit, just because, I mean, you covered fact that you didn't have a dad, but you had a stepdad, and then there was abuse that was involved in there.
Mm-hmm.
That alone is enough to change the trajectory of your life. That is enough alone. And then you add on top of that, like you said, you started getting involved with some of the scene there and moved over to San Diego. That's a huge change, just moving from one coast to another coast. Getting out. I mean, so all of that, I mean, like, that's a lot that we just like in what, 2 minutes, like, here you go, boom, kind of a thing. Like, so maybe walk me through some of those things. Like you said, like you were when your mom took off there at the end, you felt like you were truly at that point all alone, but you didn't really have any guidance. So maybe walk me through how you felt about that. Was it anger, frustration? Was it like, oh, well, this is the way it is? Like, what were you thinking through those things?
Yeah, I kind of always felt that way since my mom would leave and she'd just be out at 2, 3 in the morning. So by 13, I kind of felt like I always had to make my own way and just so I wasn't really angry. I was kind of used to it, and I was kind of I don't know, I was just like, I got this attitude, even though I didn't. I got myself in a lot of trouble, but um, yeah, actually, I felt like freedom. I was like, okay, like I wanted the challenge of being on my own and figuring it out for myself. And I was making actually good money doing the marijuana thing back when it was illegal, and so um, yeah, I felt no, I don't know. I just always had this confidence. I don't know why. But I mean, I guess when I got into trouble and I actually went down to Nicaragua on the run from the government, I got caught at the border bringing people across the border, and I didn't sign. Actually, rewind. I actually did end up. So I was by myself trying to figure it out. Nothing was working, so I ended up joining the Coast Guard Reserve.
Was that like an escape there? Is that what that was?
Yeah, I was like, nothing was working. So like I said, no direction, nothing. I was trying a little bit of this, a little bit of that, try to work some jobs here, try to do the weed thing, and it just nothing was working. And so I was like, you know what, let me go knock on Uncle Sam's door and let me sign up for this Coast Guard thing, and maybe this will give me a better trajectory. That was like 21, 22. And so I went to boot camp, and I actually felt like for the first time like a part of something,
Yeah.
like bigger than myself, like the camaraderie, like like I went to boot camp, and then right afterwards I went to A school, and just the whole thing was like awesome. I actually like, yeah, for the first time, like I felt like a part of something, and it was yeah, it was really cool. So I was able to I'm sorry. um I was able to like yeah, it was great, but what happened was I still had like a drug and alcohol issue, so as soon as I got some more money, and then I had a job, and then I came back to San Diego. I married this Italian girl at one time, so I got like extra money for like basic housing allowance, and so I was making really good money, and I came back, and instead of like getting an apartment, like I got a van, and I don't know why I got a van. So I'm living in the van. I just didn't want to pay rent. I don't know why. It was just so expensive in San Diego, but I just was always so against it. Like, I don't know, rebellious spirit. So I ended up going down to Mexico. My friends used to always say I was crazy. Like, I've kind of always done my own thing. Like, no one's going to tell me what to do. I'm just going to do it, and I'll figure it out if it's good or bad. So I went down there. I got caught up and pretty much like the cartel, and they took my van. They told me I was going to smuggle someone across the border. I was down there for a whole month. I ended up coming across the border. They catch me, and that's how I got into trouble with the federal government. And so my mom
So
had
wait. So you are officially, so you're in the Coast Guard, right? So,
yeah,
so you're there, right? And then you're
yeah,
living in the van, and then you
yeah,
go down to Mexico while you're in the Coast Guard, and
yeah,
then the cartel, you kind of get mixed up with the cartel, whatever. That's probably a whole nother story to unpack by itself.
yeah,
But then as you're smuggling this guy back while you're a Coast Guard
yeah,
agent,
yeah,
right? That's what
yeah,
I'm understanding. And then all of a
yeah.
sudden now you're in trouble with the feds as a Coast Guard representative.
Yes. Yeah. So they got me at the border, and they got my ID, and they're like, man, you're on our side, like, what are you doing? And I was like, I just kept my mouth shut, because I didn't wake up that day saying, I'm going to go to Mexico and I'm going to start becoming a legal alien smuggler. Like, just wasn't on the agenda. It was definitely like a duress case, like do this or die.
Mm.
But the way I was living my life, like I still was like, kind of had a criminal mentality. Like, I'm not going to say anything. Plus, they have my ID with my mom's house, and they said they're going to go there. So it was like, and I was just scared. So when I was at the border, I just kept my mouth shut, and I kept my mouth shut the whole time. And then then my attorney was like, yeah, we're gonna fight this case. It's a duress case. You were afraid for your life, yada yada yada. I was like, okay, but he kept telling me 3 to 5 years. If you lose, you're gonna get 3 to 5 years. If you lose, you're gonna get 3 to 5 years. I'm like, man, I've never even been in trouble in my whole life. I'm like, I couldn't, like, I'm a 21-year-old kid. Like, I'm gonna do 5 years in federal prison. Like, that's like that's just scary. So I actually ended up, my mom's boyfriend bailed me out, and I got caught up with the wrong, doing drugs, hanging out with this one girl, and I just decided to go for it. And so I run and I go to Nicaragua, and I went all the way to Nicaragua, and I was down there for a whole year, in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, next to Haiti. They're tied, um, with no money and with nothing. And I ended up in this little fishing village, because my buddy Luke had married a Nicaraguan girl I went to high school with. And he sat there and he said, he's like, you can stay here. You can live in this little fish net shack. They're going to clear it out for you, and you can fish with them, with the local fishermen. And I gave Mama Maria $40, so you'll have food. She'll cook your food for a month. And he looked at me and he said, you'll be all alone in this world unless you find God. And he turned around and walked. and he turned around and walked away. And that nobody had ever shared the gospel with me. Nobody ever told me about Jesus, God, anything. I remember one time asking my mom, what's Christmas about? And she's like, oh, it's the birth of Jesus. I had no, and that was like when I was like 13. I had zero idea. Like just God was absent from my whole upbringing. Mom was an atheist, all this stuff. But when he said it, it hit me like a ton of bricks because I was at the lowest point of my life. I was scared. I had no money. I was on the run in a third world country where I didn't speak the language. And my buddy just told me I'd be all alone in this world unless I find God, and turned around and walked away. And so I stayed there for a year and I learned the language, and the people took me in and I fished with them and they loved on me. And I got someone gave me my first Bible, a tourist, and I read it. And I didn't know what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John was because I never read it before. I was like, it's all kind of the same story, but a little bit different, you know? And then they were like, you know, then someone gave me The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren. And that's when God started like pursuing me, you know, like here I am in that, you know, now I've been walking with the Lord a long time. So I just know that's how he works. You know, meet you at your lowest moment. Got enough courage, read the book, Purpose Driven Life, wrote a mission statement, and decided to turn myself in, face the music, do that, go to the embassy, turn myself in. They fly me to Miami and they fly me back to San Diego. And, you know, they ended up giving me like 30 months, like 2.5 years. So I went
Let's
in.
back up. Can we back up just a couple of heartbeats there?
Yeah.
Because you were saying that it's you were at the lowest point in your life. I mean, you're living in a shack, basically,
Yeah.
a fishing shack. You're fishing every day with this family, and they're basically allowing you to stay as a friend, maybe. I don't really know what the term would be for that point, but basically, and I'm sure that, I mean, they probably didn't have a spare bedroom in a shack, so you're probably sleeping on the floor on a mat, maybe, or something like that's got to be a pretty low spot.
Yeah, Matt, and they put a little battery out there and they wired like a light to it. So I had like a little light at night, and it was like literally like where they put the fishing nets at. So they emptied that out and then they put the nets in another little shack. And so, yeah, it was just like in a mat. Yeah.
So where were you at, like mentally, emotionally, physically? Like where were you at in that point?
Man, well, I was like just scared and like, what am I doing? Physically, I was really skinny because I wasn't eating that much. And I was just emotionally, I was just kind of just, I don't know, just like, like I said, my view is like, I was always on my own anyways. So it was just another situation where I was on my own, but always had a little bit of help, you know, like it felt like, you know, like, yeah, I'm on my own figuring out, but I would always had a friend, or like, you know, in this case, this family helping me out. Like, I was never like completely alone, but like, yeah, I was just like, okay, I'm just here and figuring out. I really thought I was just going to live there forever and watch all the kids grow up. And this is going to be my little village. And after like a couple months, I was dreaming in Spanish. And so I learned the language pretty quick because they don't speak, like I was literally like a small little fishing village, like no English. Like, yeah, they were like,
Yeah.
what's this white dude with blonde hair and blue eyes doing? Like, where'd you even come from?
He don't fit. He just doesn't fit.
Yeah, like where this guy come?
No, that's so through that year, then, I mean, like there had to be a lot of transition, a lot of things, because you go from being on the run to saying, okay, I'm going to turn myself in. So was that the catalyst time? Was that year in there? Did something happen? Was there something that was just like, I mean, it's interesting you're saying about God showing up, but it's interesting that somebody just few words, and that's how God kind of cracks you upside the head a little bit and says, hey, wake up.
Yeah, it was just so powerful. I remember he was going to a church in Costa Rica. And so this is my buddy Luke from high school. We used to like do all our dumb stuff together with. And when he spoke, it wasn't him speaking. He was like this picture of like it wasn't the Luke I knew. He was like a man. Like, and when he spoke, it was like with authority. It was like he looked at me. And I know he's going to this charismatic Holy Ghost church in Costa Rica. And I think he was just filled with the Spirit of God. And he just, when he spoke to me, it just pierced through, and it was crazy. And then it was how God got my attention. And there was this radio station called Radio Rumbos, and every time they would do an entry to like a new song or their segments, like, so it happened like 10 times a day. There was this song, it was like popular in the 80s or something. It was like, so you think you're better off alone. And I would hear that 10 times a day. And it was like, that was the words that Luke spoke to me. You'll be all alone in this world unless you find God. and I'd hear that on the radio. So you think you're better off alone. It was just surreal. It was surreal. I mean, looking back, I didn't see, it took me a while to actually put all together and just seeing how God's work. But then I was a horrible fisherman. So I sold my net. So I sold my nets for a mountain bike, and I'd ride my mountain bike to the closest tourist area where the surfers would be at. And I made a friend over there, this guy, Chris, and he was from San Diego, and he's building a house. So then I started helping building his house. He's like, look, man, I can't pay you more than I'm paying the local labor. So I could pay you 80 cents an hour and I can give you lunch. And I was like, I was like, that's more than I'm making fishing. You know, sometimes fishing, it'd be skunked. I'd be out in the water for 12 hours and get nothing. So I took that job offer. I worked for him for like 3-4 months, and I'd ride my bike every day. And in this time, somebody gave me my Bible. And so gave me a Bible. So I started reading it, and just hope, just from reading it, like hope, like just started rising up in me. And I remember riding that bike. I'd have to ride like 12 miles each way on these like dirt roads just to get to this other part of town to help build Chris's house. And I just felt like full of life, and I was happy that I had a job, and I happy my needs were met, you know. And I was a local, like, I mean, I worked with the locals. I lived with the locals. I was just like, I was like one of them. And then my buddy Luke came back with his dad, and they had some money. And so, they started drinking. I started drinking with them, and then it just got really bad again. It got really bad again. And I was just like, you know what, this is just not going anywhere for me. And I need to turn myself in and go face the music and just get this part of my life over with. And that was the catalyst. Was just, it started getting really dark again. I had all that hope.
Did that scare you? Like when you saw that coming again, did that scare you? Was it one of those things where it was like, oh, I don't want to be back at that spot again? Is that kind of where you were at?
Yeah. Yep. And just, there was no future in it, like literally, like I wanted to come back down, and one day I wanted to own some property down there, and I wanted to like build a surf camp. And I saw what other guys were doing, and I was like, that's a great life, but I can't do it in my position now. And yes, it scared me just seeing how like the drinking and the drugs and everything was like just really bad. And it was just taking me to a dark place. And so I don't know if it's God's grace or just me, a combination of both, just, seeing like down the road and like this is leading absolutely nowhere. And the only way to get past this situation is to just turn myself in and face the music and just get this part of my life over with.
So how did you find the courage to be able to turn yourself in?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because it does take a lot of courage. You're free and you're going to go incarcerated. So it was that book, The Purpose Driven Life. I read it, and I wrote a mission statement to God at the very end of it. And I prayed, and I just woke up, and I got to the embassy. I mean, there's a crazy story in between that, but I almost got killed on the way there in Managua. And like, I was walking there, and then it got dark, because it takes a lot of courage. It was like dark, and I was like, man, do I want to, I was sitting at this little market, and I was drinking a beer, and I knew I was going to turn myself in. So it was my last beer, and I'm like, all right, like, I'm getting the courage, right? And then next thing you know, it's dark. And so I walked by this kid, and I asked him where the embassy was in Spanish, and he's like, oh yeah, follow me. I literally have nothing. I have no money. I'm wearing like a pair of shorts, a t-shirt, and some local like little flip-flops, plastic flip-flops. And but I remember it was like, because I knew I was in a very dangerous part of Nicaragua. I used to see it on the news, and like machetes, like people hacking themselves up with machetes and stuff. And so I found a piece of rebar, and I picked it up, and I put it down my shorts. So when I'm following this kid, he next thing you know, these other guys come out, and they push me up against this wall, and they're asking me for stuff. I'm like, I don't have anything. And then they search me, and they find the rebar, and they pull it out, and they hit me right here. You probably can't see it, but it's a big scar. So they came like less than an inch away from taking my eye out. I turned around, and I ran, and I'm bleeding profusely everywhere. And the cops come up, and they look at me, and they take off. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna die. Like literally, like in America, like you see a police officer, you're like, hey, help, stop. They're gonna help you. Like here, they looked at me, they're like, who's this crazy white guy bleeding? We're out of here. We don't even want anything to do with this. This kid came up, and I swear he's like my guardian angel. He came up, and he said, you have to come with me, and we should just start running. And he takes me to his house. He locks the door. He got big steel like security doors, and he takes out a sponge, and he just starts bathing me, like cleaning me up. And then I woke up in the morning. I was in a bed. I woke up, And I just told him I had to go to the embassy. And so he rode me on his handlebars of his bicycle through town, dropped me off at the US Embassy, told him my situation, and they put me in a prison on top of a mountain for 3 days until they got my plane ticket, and they flew me back.
Man. So all of that, and you said you spent about 30 months or about 2 years or so?
The first time, yeah, 2.5 years. Yep.
Yeah. So man, all of the things that are going on there, how did that change? I mean, what specifically inside of you changed to be able to say, I can tackle this life in a different manner and I can go in a different direction? And the things that I had previously that I thought were valuable and the way that I thought I was living my life, it's not going to help me move forward. It's not going to help me be not alone, right? You were saying if I ever want to have any kind of a life, I can't do it alone. I mean, that seems to be the theme going on. So
Yeah.
what was that change? Like what were you, give me some details on that.
Yeah, man. It was really that mission statement, that I read that book and I wrote a mission statement to God, like pretty much like, yeah, if you're real, like, like I could use some help down here. And so when I did my time, I started reading the Bible more, some other good books. I'm not really a fictional guy, so I like to read. And they'll come at you with every religion, and when you're incarcerated, like everyone. So like I really got to the bottom of like, okay, like because you get a lot of confusion. So like I spent a lot of time reading like books of like apologetics, the case for Christ, like kind of dry books, but like just defending of the faith and like the fact like is Jesus is who he says he is,
Yeah.
and because I was like, if he is, then this changes everything, the path to life is narrow, but the way to destruction, the path to destruction is broad and wide. And so the world always was saying, like, well, make up your own God, do what you want, like, is it this religion, that religion, like, oh my goodness, but Jesus says I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. So I was like, that's a bold statement, that's a narrow statement, that's a black and white statement. So I got to the bottom of that, and then I just fully put my trust in Christ, and I was like, okay, he is who he says he is. And then that journey began, and I can't say it was a perfect journey, but it's definitely like it was the beginning of a relationship with him. And then I had to do my time. I'd get out. I got out. I told the courts I had a drug problem, so I'd go to rehab. I always did really good in prison and programs. I just followed the program, no issues, get out. But as soon as I'd get out, I'd fall for the traps, the women, the drugs, everything that you think you're missing, the lust of the flesh, all that kind of stuff. And so I'd fall, and then, and I got in another trouble, and then I got in a high-speed pursuit, and then I ended up doing 3 years in state prison. And then that's when I really was just like, okay, like, I'm done.
This pattern's not working for me.
This pattern's not working. So,
Yeah.
so I wish it was like a one and done story, I'm just, I just real stubborn, cause like I said, I didn't grow up with a father, always did my own thing since like 12, 13 years old. And like, it just took a while to break me. But God was faithful, and he's always kept me, and
So where are you at right now? Like right now, because I mean, there's like you said, you're back and forth, but right now, like what do you use as your guide, as your values? Like where are you at currently? If somebody was saying, look, I've been back and forth, I'm listening to the story, I can relate with Wes because I've been there back and I'm tired of this pattern. What would you tell that guy right now, or gal?
Full surrender to Jesus, period. Like no, like, maybe I can get a little bit, maybe I could still date the world a little bit or do my own thing a little bit. I'd say full surrender. It says you've been bought with a price, that your life is not your own anymore. And the more, that you would believe in Jesus Christ, and that he is who he says he is, and that, he just wants your whole heart, and that was the game changer for me, because I was playing with it. Like it ruined everything to know the knowledge that I knew, because I had 6 years to read and study the Bible, and to go back out into the world. It's like I had a grace, like to actually experience what the Bible tells you not to do. Like those parameters that God puts up, like I always thought like was the, take away my fun, take away my freedom, take away all this stuff. But really those parameters are the parameters where life happens, life and life more abundantly happens, because the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Christ comes to give us life, and life more abundantly. Well, that happens in the parameters that he set for us, because he's a good father. And so when I finally was like, I'm going to surrender all to him, and just, I'm not messing around anymore. Like I'm going to go to a ministry school, and because I tried the AA thing and all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, well, pick your own God. and put down the drugs and then sleep with whoever you want. I was like, well, that's not what my Bible says. And that's the stuff that got me in trouble to begin with. And I was
Yeah.
like, so, yeah, I could be sober, but pretty much marching my way straight to hell. Like, it's like, it's like, so I'm like, I read the Bible for too long to know. So I was like, that's not going to work. So what really changed was the full surrender. I'm like, I was supposed to go to this ministry school the first time I got out of prison. My mom was going to pay for it, which is a miracle in itself because like I said, we grew up extremely poor. She was really tight with money, and she was going to pay like the $6,000 tuition, which is still really cheap for like a year-long program. But I was like, no, I have to do it on my own. I have to make my own money. And that was just a trap, and that was pride and whatnot. So, but that
It's amazing.
opportunity,
We have to constantly be learning lessons. It doesn't
yeah,
stop.
it doesn't stop. No, I'm still learning them, and so, that's the thing though. When I finally like drew the line in the sand, and I was like, you know what? I'm not playing with this anymore. Like the world is literally like the devil, the demons, the world, my own pride, all this stuff is literally trying to kill me, you know?
Mm.
Um, so I'm gonna go all in with Jesus. I'm gonna give God 100% and see how that works out for me. And so I went to ministry school. I met my wife. I have a beautiful daughter, an amazing wife. I got a successful business. I disciple guys. I've traveled the world preaching the gospel. I've been to Uganda. I've been back to Nicaragua. I've been on TV in Nicaragua preaching the gospel. I've been on radio preaching the gospel. I've been to prisons and orphanages. I go to a rehab once a month up here in California, and I preach the gospel there and win souls and see miracles happen. And so, when I finally just gave everything to God, I was just like, yeah, you can have it all. Like if you really, like, if you want to take this mess and make it a message, like you can like have it all. And like
Bringing
that,
order to chaos.
yeah, bringing order to chaos, man. And he's the only one that can do it. He's the only one that can bring the order into the chaos. And it's this submission and the surrender, like full surrender. Like it can't be like there was grace until I finally got to that point. And then they say, the word says, those who have been forgiven much love much, because I know how much I've been forgiven of. And I know that the goodness of God brings men to repentance. So God has been so good to me, even in my stubbornness, and the analogy is like sometimes, those wild stallions, then when they get broke, they become the best horses, you got to break them,
Yeah.
and then so like, that's how the Lord graciously, like, like I just look back at my life and all the stupid stuff I did, before him and even after knowing him. And then like, he just has saved me and like, to still be on this earth. And I just know that I'm saved to serve. And I know my identity now that I'm a son of God. I know that my purpose is to, love him, love my family, and love those around me. And it's just, and it's more of an adventure than I thought I was on before. Because
Yeah,
before,
that's a key element right there. More of an
yeah,
adventure than you ever dreamed. I mean, that's such a huge thing. So
yeah,
we're starting to wrap up here, but like if
yeah.
there was one thing that you want to make sure that out of all of the stuff that you've said, what is the one point, the one takeaway that you want somebody to really walk away with? And the second part of that is if somebody wanted to talk to you or connect with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, sure. Man, the one thing, I mean, if you're hopeless, there's hope. If you're in a situation you think that no one's gone through, someone has. What you're looking for is Jesus. He's the one that loves you, created you, and wants a relationship with you and to spend all eternity with you. He is that one thing that you've been looking for your whole entire life. You might be searching for it in all the wrong places, but he's been calling you ever since you left your mother's womb, and he just loves you so much. And that's the one and only thing that it really matters in life, is that relationship with him, because he's the creator. He's the one who created us. And yeah, if you ever wanted to talk about this, or if you're struggling and going through any kind of situation that you just feel like you're giving up hope, yeah, you could definitely reach out to me, and just give your cell phone number. If I can help anybody, I'm here to help. And so that's the message. Just turn to him, trust in him, fully surrender. He has your best interests You know, the enemy does come to steal, kill, and destroy, but Christ has come to give you life and life more abundantly. And he knows the plans that he has for you, and they're of good and not of evil, plans to prosper you, give you a hope and a future. You know, this is the Bible. He's in the ministry. God's in the ministry of reconciliation. He's reconciling the world back to himself, and he has so much for you. And yeah, and hope's not lost. It might look dark in the world, but man, where there's darkness, the light shines brighter.
Yeah.
Amen. And so
exactly. Yep. So we're at the end of our time, but my
Yeah.
goodness gracious, there's a lot to unpack there. And I'm sure that there's many, many more stories that you could tell. I think your life would probably fill pages of books to be able to do that. But thank you,
Yeah.
Wes, for taking the time to share a little bit with us. I will definitely put some stuff in the notes as far as within the thing, be able to have some contact information. We can gather that and get that. But
Sure.
man, absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. It was a pleasure.
All right. So next time, again, if you've listened to this one and haven't listened to Kathleen, you need to listen to Kathleen. If you listen to Kathleen and now you're just finishing this one, man, this is a duo that is a powerful duo. Make sure that you guys, if you have a chance to get in touch with them, listen to them. This is an awesome way to be able to talk with them. So until next story, we will talk to you then.